Welcome back. Well, following the Public Enterprises Minister's announcement that SAA would undergo radical restructuring to ensure its financial and operational sustainability, some pundits feel that the efforts are a waste of time. They say the airline can't be saved. And in fact, we're going to get into more of this with Free Market Foundation's Terry Markman. Terry, thanks a lot for joining us this evening. Big question, can SAA be saved?
I'm afraid to say I'm on record as saying no. 10 years ago, we could have privatised SAA. SAA hasn't made a profit for 10 years. We think it owes something like 20 to 30 billion rand. And we've tried restructuring after restructuring, turnaround after turnaround. I think that people are getting giddy with all the turnarounds. And quite honestly, you know, one has to think of glib things to say. Einstein apparently said that insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Now, Pravin Gordhan apparently is latest, I haven't seen it, but somebody told me that he's now talking about restructuring again, or radical restructuring. We've been doing that for the last 5 or so years, and it just hasn't helped.
Are we playing politics with an airline, with the air carrier, and simply because it is the national carrier?
I think it's all politics, by the way. I think that politics should have had nothing to do with it for the past 10 years, and we may well have had an airline that could fly. I mean, we know that the previous CEO, Girana, went in, tried to do something, and couldn't, because of the, I assume, I don't know firsthand, but I assume the political interference. By the way, Telkom is very successful. I think that the CEO, Sipho Moseka, when he was appointed, told the politicians, if any one of you come through that front door, or call me, or send me an email, I'm walking out. Something like that. So the contract was, I will run it as a business and don't interfere as politicians. And that's what politicians should do. They should not be having anything to do with business whatsoever.
Yeah, and then in that case then, does that mean that the best solution for SAA at this moment in time, we'll get into the numbers in terms of what does it mean for us, but the right way to go, or the strategy would be just to completely sell it?
Well, there's not much to sell even. You know, you could maybe, if you were to sell it or liquidate it, the liabilities are much, much greater than the assets. So all you would do by selling, and I'll be a bit cynical about the pencils and the tables, is to reduce your liabilities a little bit. There may be some airlines, there may have a few planes that they could sell, there may be a few leases that they could get some money from, but it's very little. Really, we have to bite the bullet. And every year we delay, it's going to cost us another 5 or 6 billion rand a year. That means, just by the way, to put it in perspective, that means another 30,000 houses that could have been built. Now, if I were to do a survey, and I've done one amongst my friends, but if I were to do a national survey and I said to people, would you rather spend 5 billion every year keeping SAA afloat when it's not needed, or would you rather that 5 billion rand go into schools or 30,000 houses or scholarships or whatever? I doubt very many people, other than a few politicians, would say they'd rather put it into SAA.
But then what's the solution? And I'm standing and allow me to play devil's advocate for a little bit, because on the one side, people say, but this is the national carrier that you're speaking about, the pride and joy, what was supposed to be the pride and joy of South Africa, right? Especially where aviation is concerned. And what happens to all of those individuals that were not part of the shenanigans, were not part of the mess, who genuinely wanted to do their job and are continuing to do their job as diligently as they can under the circumstances of SAA's leadership?
I'm afraid to say it's very, very sad for those people. If SAA is liquidated, they will have to be dealt with in a reasonable way, which means things like the labour legislation must be applied, they can be offered retrenchment money and so on, but there's no other way. I mean, we cannot afford to run an airline paying 5 billion rand a year. So this is a case of, we can't turn the clock back and say we should have done this. I know what we should have done, but it's too late now. All we can do is to say, are we going to spend another 5 billion rand next year on this or not? And it's not in the Treasury. The Treasury doesn't have it. Tito Mboweni has said he doesn't have it. Tito Mboweni has also said, I wouldn't spend 1 cent of my own money on the airline. And the AG has said that the airline is not a going business. And even the board, Mr. Kingston, came out and said, we haven't done financial statements for 2 years. Why? Because if we presented them, it would show that the SAA is bankrupt, and then we would have to liquidate it. So everybody knows that SAA is bankrupt and has to, and I think everybody should also know that it has to be liquidated.
I know that I'm pulling strings here, but I'm genuinely trying to find an alternative solution to this. And is there an alternative solution? And I'll tell you why. If it's tickets for the national carrier, for SAA, and individuals are just, and people are going to just have to bite the bullet, unfortunately it's not just people biting the bullet, it's families, it's livelihoods, it's people with children, it's people who support other people as a result of even having jobs at SAA. The ramifications of it are so vast, which is understandable why unions will be so jittery and reactive to any prospect of any form of job loss. Now, can you imagine that people of unions coming out, and if anybody had to come out and say, actually, we're just completely liquidating this, and everybody else that had a job at SA,
Yep.
sorry guys, it's the end of the road for you guys. Do you understand? The ramifications
I understand
are absolutely...
completely. The ramifications are very, very serious, which I repeat is why the politicians should get out of business. They have created this situation. They are the ones that are going to have to go and talk to Labour and get it out of it. By the way, I wouldn't say that there's a magic solution, but there is a way of carrying the SAA flag if you feel so passionate about it.
Great, give me that way.
Well, what we could do is we have got routes and slots, meaning that we have the right to fly between Joburg and a whole lot of other cities around the world. And when we arrive there, say in London, we've got a slot that says we can land at a certain time. Now, those have some value. I'm not sure how much they are, but they have some value. We could enter into an agreement with some other airline. People have been talking about Ethiopian Airlines or one of those airlines that says, you come in on condition that you fly the SAA flag, we will give you the right to all our routes and to all our routes and slots. They could then fly a new company, let's call it South African International Corporation or Airline Corporation or something like that. It would be run completely by them on some sort of a tender arrangement. They could actually put in a price to say how much they'd be prepared to pay for these slots and routes. And then they could fly from Ethiopia to Joburg. And then they could fly from Joburg to, say, Australia or New Zealand, which is very difficult for them to do at the moment. So there may be some benefit. But until we test that, we won't know. But that is a small way of ameliorating things. It doesn't help you with the 5,000 or 6,000 employees that are there. The pilots, by the way, I think are very well qualified, very well trained, and I think 30 or 40% over the last few years have already got jobs outside the country. And they could be quite easily employed elsewhere. They could even be employed on this new airline, for example.
Well, there we go. We've got different voices that are coming out with SAA, but of course, Terry, as you say that, listen, at this moment in time, we could have saved it 10 years ago. And unfortunately, at this moment in time, according to you, there's just no saving SAA, but we're going to leave it there for this evening. I do appreciate, though, the fact that you did give us some tips in terms of what else, what's the alternative to job losses in this country. I want to always trying to find an alternative there. Terry Markman from the Free of Market Foundation.